Oh, hello, my darling hearts. Welcome again to the Transform Your Birth podcast. And thanks for tuning in on this particular topic. This is a topic very clear, very close to my heart, because I know it makes a big difference to really inform yourself around and educating yourself around the different options when it comes to managing pregnancy and also the birth process. And we had earlier on the beautiful Catherine Bell, who did her PhD on informed consent and has developed a process of birth mapping, which is a wonderful episode worth listening to as well, where she really gets you to think through what your options are so that you can communicate who you are and what's important to you to your health providers. But today with me, I have the lovely Alexandra Galaska, and she's from an organization called Just the Inserts. And I was very, very curious about her work because she's really encouraging people to step up, get to know what's being offered, and understand that we need to have good information when it comes to making decisions. So, welcome, Alexandra. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a joy to be here.
Good. Now, tell us how you got into this work. I'm always curious about people's personal stories.
So, like many people with many of the things that you start an organization for, was my own personal struggle. I
Mm,
always say that just the insert started from the cry of a mother. So I have three children now. I have a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 1-year-old. But when I was first pregnant with my first child, I tried to consume pretty much every single natural-minded birth book, blog, everything that you could think of, trying
mm,
to be educated on anything that could happen during birth. Unfortunately, there's just a lot of things that you don't know until you know them.
mm,
And I had a very traumatic first birth. It was a 44-hour labor. There was ended up being quite a few interventions that, in hindsight, I definitely don't feel like I had the informed consent with. And my first daughter was injured by the synthetic vitamin K injection.
mm,
She suffered severe jaundice. She had colic. She was colic. She had neonatal acne, eczema. She had some gut inflammation, some liver inflammation, and it just really woke my eyes up that just because a medical product is widely used and widely recommended doesn't mean it's the
mm,
best product for me. It
mm,
could be a product somebody else uses and it's fine, but maybe that's not the best one for me and my family. So I started desperately trying to find more information about all the other products that are recommended to children. I was not prepared with the onslaught of vaccines and antibiotics and over the counters. And there are just so many medications in
mm,
America that are prescribed to brand new babies right out of the gate. And so I wanted to have .gov verifiable credible information because when I went on to those blogs or social media, I just felt like everything was very polarizing. I felt like
yeah,
everybody was clamoring to make the decision for me, whether that be to accept it or to decline it.
mm,
And I wanted to be able to make that decision for myself. I knew that I was a steward of my child. I knew that I was a steward of her health and her well-being, and I wanted to be responsible and have that authority for her medical decisions. So I ended up finding, at least in America, they're called manufacturer inserts. And these are regulated documents on the FDA websites for every prescription pharmaceutical, vaccine, biologic. And some over-the-counter medications also have inserts. And so I just started reading them. I taught myself through over 10,000 hours of learning
wow,
different government trainings and healthcare trainings on how to read them, how to interpret them, how to find them. And I started sharing the information, and I was not prepared with how many people felt the exact same way. They just
mm,
wanted the cold, hard facts of what the manufacturer, what the government knows about these products, and pretty alarming information is listed on these inserts, and it's not widely discussed, and parents don't know about it, even though the manufacturers and the government know about it. So I just started sharing my information. My account blew up. I did my website. I did experience quite a bit of censorship in the 2021 timeframe. I was
mm,
deleted off of Instagram for sharing .gov information. I was able to come back later on, and the community's grown. It's been just a fantastic community of so
Mm,
many different people, patients, parents, and also professionals, medical professionals that see this. They see the inconsistencies in their workplace. They themselves might have had some adverse reactions that are listed on inserts. And so everything that I do is just to cultivate an environment of informed consent. I believe it's a human right. I believe
mm,
every single person has the right to know everything that is known about that product so they can make a well-considered decision for themselves
mm.
and for their families.
Wow. What you've raised here is so very important because from the time I had my first child, which is almost 30 years ago, to my fourth child, and even more so now, is there are more and more things being loaded onto parents around, even the vaccination schedule has become incredibly crowded. And I'm sure there's a point where there's too many. Um, and we've got to start to really think about what we're doing and why we're doing it to become conscious in order to make an informed consent because it is a legal obligation of our caregivers. But because there's just so much stuff that is being offered more and more over time and in a shorter time period, it's very difficult for parents to get their heads around that. So
Oh,
I love that
absolutely.
I love that we're having this conversation. So, when it comes to pregnancy, what are the sort of things that people should start to inform themselves around in that particular period of time?
That's such a good question. And it's not very exciting to talk about, but it's
Mm,
very important.
yeah,
So, in America, there are several vaccines that are recommended to a pregnant woman. I believe it's very similar in Australia.
yeah,
Um, there are now RSV vaccines, there's COVID vaccines, flu vaccines, and the Tdap vaccine. So that's the vaccine for tetanus, diphtheria, and pertussis. And
right.
the main reason why it's given to a pregnant woman is it's intended to protect a baby for that pertussis piece, which is also known as whooping cough. And so the idea is the product, the vaccine is created that it's given to the pregnant woman in her late second third trimester time period. And then she develops antibodies, passes it on to the baby, and then the baby has a bridge between birth and then when they're able to get the DTaP vaccine, which is for diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis. It's the child's version of the Tdap, the young child's version.
Yeah.
And so it's meant to be that bridge. However, unfortunately, there are some pretty concerning things on the Tdap vaccine insert that are not widely discussed among pregnant women, and they don't really at large get to have that informed consent of what the manufacturer says
Mm,
about the Tdap vaccine.
mm,
Also, including what are the ingredients in that vaccine. It isn't just the antigen, it isn't just the thing that is what is creating the antibodies. It's other excipients or other ingredients in that vaccine. So there's a high level of aluminum in that vaccine. And
mm,
I have in my book, well considered a handbook for making informed medical decisions, I go in depth of the research around aluminum and
mm,
how it can be very concerning for a pregnant woman to have high doses of aluminum. And it's been found to cross into the placenta. If or there's a study that I link for rabbits that it's found in the baby's liver and found in some vital organs. And so it's again, it's just really important as a pregnant woman
mm,
to understand all the products that you're accepting and see how that might play into your decisions, either for that singular product or your entire protocol for pregnancy. Are you going to maybe accept one and not the other? Or maybe you just want to take some time to delay and research a little bit more and see, is this the right product for me? The other important thing to understand about the Tdap vaccine, there's a section called the mechanism of action, and that is the biological events that occur whenever you accept a vaccine or a drug or anything like that. And in the mechanism of action section for the Tdap vaccine and the DTaP vaccines, it states that the level of protection to determine if you are immune to pertussis is unknown. So there's really not firm evidence from the scientific community that these products will 100% provide protection. And that's important because when we're told a product is safe and effective, we want to know what are the
mm,
limitations of effectiveness around that product, what are the limitations of safety around that product.
mm. These are things we take a lot for granted. For those listening, I just want to really head us off at the gate. You might be thinking right now, this is anti-vax, propaganda or creating vaccine hesitancy, which is not what this is about. I just want to make that point because I think when people like to neatly put others in boxes who are really questioning and thinking through why we're doing this, what's the risks, what's the benefits, how actually effective is it, it's very easy to call others an anti-vaxxer or, promoting propaganda around vaccine hesitancy. My darlings, that's just one big excuse not to think. Okay. This is about getting informed. And I think medicine is, historically, medicine is full of periods of time where we've done things and gone, oh, geez, that's not a good idea. And because there's just so much on the market now, I think it is important that we start to inform ourselves and really get a sense of what's really going to help me and what isn't, and what is the evidence around this stuff, which could be very overwhelming, I'm sure. Um, Alexandra, I'm just thinking in terms of my, pregnant women out there who are listening to this podcast, what sort of reassurance can you give them around when it comes to finding this sort of information in a way that um, doesn't have an agenda and isn't trying to push them into a particular opinion? Because I think that that can be where people really do resist taking in this information. If there's an actual agenda towards the information being presented, what sort of support or advice could you give people around that?
Well, I first just want to just say thank you for everything you just said because I would have loved to come across that message when I
Mm,
first started researching. It would have been so reassuring to me and it would have been so calming to realize that it is okay to ask questions.
yeah.
It's okay to be an informed consumer for all products you accept on the market, including medical products. It
Mm,
is okay to wonder how this might affect you or your baby. That is not something that should be shamed or judged,
yeah.
and that's something I felt when I first started researching. So thank you, first of all, for just saying that because
Mm,
that is just so important when you first
yeah.
start researching these products and then this industry. It can be very overwhelming, and my first advice out of the gate is just to realize that it is a process. It is
Mm,
going to take time. There is so much information out there, and every single person that you come across is going to have different biases and different parts of their journeys that they're on. And I upfront say that I personally believe it's impossible to be unbiased. I think we
yeah.
naturally have a bias, and I think that's beautiful. I think it's based on your lived experience and your
Mm,
research and the things that you prioritize in your life. And so I think that if you go into it saying, I want to only talk to someone who is completely unbiased, that's not possible. And so I
no,
think for you to
fair
just
call.
realize that
Mm,
there are going to be some people that maybe have a passion for a certain industry or product, and then there's going to be people that were injured by that product, and they might
mm,
have some scar tissue that they're dealing with, or maybe some unprocessed trauma that they're still going through, and that's okay too. And
yeah.
so to just realize going into it that there is a lot of emotion, and that is why I stick to the inserts. I stick
Yeah.
to the information that is verified by our government, and that the manufacturers, they're the most intimate with their products. And so if they're telling me that this adverse reaction was known to be caused by this product, that's something that I'm going to be alert to. And that's something
Mm,
that I'm going to be very cognizant of. And I'm going to take that information in, process it, speak about it with my partner, and decide if that's the product that I want for me. I'm going to obviously be biased here and recommend the resources that I have on my website. I have a free training course, no email required to access. I don't sell any third-party data or anything like that. And there's
mm,
also audio parts to it, so you can listen to it on your phone if you need to. And it takes about 2 to 3 hours to go through. And it is specific for America. However, I've been told by many people in my community that are Australians that it's been helpful for them too. But I
yeah.
teach you how to
Well, we
find and
follow you
read.
guys, I think so.
I believe we're very, very close.
Yeah, we
Yes.
are.
The
Yeah.
trade names might be a little bit different, but we're very close.
Right.
But I teach you how to find and read manufacturer inserts. And at least for us, most manufacturer inserts follow a template. And so I teach you how to identify that template and the
Mm.
different sections of that template. So, for example, there's a section called contraindications. And in that section, these are medical conditions or certain situations that the manufacturer is communicating to the healthcare provider, communicating to the patient or parent that if you have this medical condition, this increases your risk for an adverse reaction.
Right.
So that's important for you to
Yeah.
know. So if you do have that medical condition, then you can pause, have that conversation with your provider, decide if that's the best product for you.
Mm.
Um, and then also, there's just a plethora of information for special populations. For pregnant women, was this product even tested on pregnant women? There's a healthy patient bias for clinical trials where sometimes pediatric populations or pregnant populations or geriatric populations are not included in clinical trials. So
Mm.
when that product is brought to market, a great example was some of the RSV vaccines, they were not tested on certain populations. And so you have to understand, my apologies, the COVID vaccines. So when that product was brought to market, it had not been tested. And the way that the manufacturer kind of remedies that is that they have a pregnancy registry. So if you're accepting that product and it just came on the market, it's important for you to understand you are opting in to be an uncontrolled test subject.
Mm.
And if you do accept that product, please make sure that you register in that registry. So if there is any adverse reactions, you can report that and hopefully provide informed consent for pregnant women down the line.
Yeah.
But um, all that to say, my advice would be take your time. It is really, really hard to jump 2 feet in. You'll burn yourself out. It's a process. Take mental breaks. Go get out in nature, go ground, go sunbathe, nature bathe.
Mm.
You know, it's just really hard to process some of this information, especially when we have preconceived notions about it. And then just take it at your own pace. I do have an exercise in that free training course called Root of Fear. And I have you sit down and write down all of your fears, whether it be
Mm.
vaccines or drugs or antibiotics or whatever it is. Write down all of your fears about that product and then kind of categorize them. So, is this fear of a disease? Do you fear whooping cough? Do you fear chickenpox? Do you fear measles? Or is this fear of upsetting a medical provider? Are you upset that your OB or your midwife or your pediatrician is going to be mad at you for not accepting this or maybe delaying this product? Are you upset that you might be judged by culture? Because those
Mm.
are two different things, right? If we're fearing a disease, the research required to kind of calm our fears and empower us is going to be different than maybe we need to set some boundaries. Maybe we need to um, have a little bit more emotional work about not placating or abdicating our authority to external
Mm.
forces, whether that be a
Yeah.
medical provider or a family member.
I
So I
think,
kind of walk through that in the training course.
yeah, I think you're raising an important point around our medical health providers is it's a little bit unrealistic to expect them to be all over this stuff because there's so many different procedures they administer each and every day and things change and they've got to be on top of that. So in many ways what we're inviting people to do with this information is to just step up to the plate and really tune in and make sure that what you're doing is something that feels right for you, and we'll talk about that in a moment. The other thing I think it's really important to realize, and boy, if anything taught us this, it was COVID, is that what is a risk for one person may be a benefit to another. And the rollout of worldwide vaccinations with that had very limited testing and we were told were safe and effective. And I think we wanted to believe that they were safe and effective. For some people who had big reactions, they were still being encouraged to have that second and third vaccine. And that was just poor medical decision making and not really thinking, what is it that we're doing? And then, of course, we had healthy populations who were much more able to get COVID and overcome them and develop more true immunity, at least for longer than the vaccinations were providing, which was really minimized. So there was a lot of stuff that went on there that I think was teaching us to um, not not just blindly trust the authorities who are guiding us down this path, including our doctors, including our midwives, and people in these, in the place that keeps us safe, these hospitals, but to recognize that they are imperfect beings. And when it comes to making decisions, I think it is really important that we step up and really ascertain, what are the risks and what are the benefits for us, particularly according to our own individual health profile. Would you agree with that?
110%.
Mm,
110%. I think
yeah.
that every single person, I believe every single person has the authority to accept, delay, or decline
Mm,
any or all medical products. And with that authority comes the responsibility to decide and to research
yeah.
every product for you or your child. And I want to be very cautious too, because I have many people in my community. I have parents and patients, and then the providers that, and professionals, scientific
Mm,
professionals. I have people that are within the CDC headquarters that were messaging me during COVID, and they were kind of very frustrated with the response that was happening. And I
yeah.
had people that were in Pfizer that were sending me internal documents because they were very frustrated on how everything was going on, and it wasn't what they had signed up for. And it's hard because they can be quite polarizing, and we kind of touched on
Yeah,
this
yeah.
earlier, where you have people that accept all and blindly follow all and want to mandate it for all, and then you have others that have no um, trust in any entity or any professional.
True.
And so it's
Yeah.
really, really hard to navigate that. And I actually just came up with, I developed this tool called the Vaccine Perspective Spectrum. And I kind of tried to capture everybody's feelings and views because it can be
Mm,
quite emotional. And there's, I think, 13 different views that I ended up coming up with, thinking over 6 years of talking with people in my DMs and just in our community. And so that's why for me, it doesn't bother me whether you accept, delay, or decline. I just want you to be informed. I
yeah.
just want you
That's
to
the bottom
know.
line.
So
Yeah.
if you accept that product, then you can be alert. You can be observant to any potential adverse reactions. You can
And then work
expedite
with them.
medical treatment. You
Mm,
can eliminate diagnostic confusion. And then if you decide to delay that product, you can do so not in a fear-based mindset. You can do so that you are actively researching, like that root of fear exercise, whether you're
mm,
researching a disease, you're researching maybe a state mandate that you have, or maybe you and your partner are watching documentaries together or listening to podcasts
mm,
together or reading the inserts together. And then if you decline that product, you're doing it because you know that that
yeah.
product doesn't work in your health protocol, and you're not doing it out of fear. Because I say too that declining a product just because somebody told you or because you have an irrational fear is just as bad as accepting it. I want you to stand in that responsibility and authority no matter what you decide,
Mm,
even if it's different from what I personally decide for my family.
yeah.
That is my goal. That is
Yeah.
what I'm passionate about, is that informed
Yeah.
consent
And we
for
all
every decision.
we all deserve that bodily autonomy and the respect for people to
Absolutely.
make choices according to what's right for their family. So, making decisions like this can be very tricky. And there are questions that I encourage people to ask of their providers. And the first two are very basic. What are the risks? What are the benefits? And if
Mhm.
somebody says to you there are no risks, ask the question again because
That
they're
is
probably
impossible.
they're probably saying that because they actually don't know. And
Saline even has risks.
yeah, yeah, right. So what are the risks? What are the benefits? Are there any alternatives? If you choose to decline something in order to manage that risk, there might be other ways to manage that risk. So, for example, when we talk about induction, I often say to people, um, you know, ask the question, what are the risks? What are the benefits of induction? Because they get told that they've got gestational diabetes, so we need to induce for gestational diabetes to manage that risk, but we're not really talking about the risks of induction.
Mhm,
And the there's always going to be decisions to weigh up around that risk benefit ratio, which will be different for every person.
mhm,
And so, what are the risks? What are the benefits? How else could we manage this? Are there any alternatives? So, if you're looking at things like, the risk of whooping cough, well, can you manage the risk of that in another way? Potentially, that's something you
mhm,
can explore. What else might we need if we do this? What would happen if we waited? What would happen if we didn't do the procedure? These are powerful questions that help people to identify the difference between a medical necessity and a choice. And pretty much everything is a choice unless there's serious emergency things going on in that moment. So, with that that and so g gathering that information is an important part. Now, then making a decision from that, I think requires a deeper intelligence inside of us. And I think the feeling into it, to utilize our natural bodily intelligence, which is, people don't talk about natural. We're
Mhm.
all in our heads, and we forget that our body has an intelligence to it as well. To really feel into, does this feel right to do this? Does it feel right to give my baby, I don't know, a Hep B and vaccination at birth? These are the choices you'll be asked to make. How to tune in to some of that intuitive sort of wisdom within you. Do you want to speak to that, Alexandra? What's been your experience with that?
Oh, that's such a great point, and I love that you brought that up. I have this sweatshirt that I just developed, and it's called A Mother's Instinct is Data.
Yeah,
And I think
right.
so many times when we think about a mother's instinct, it's kind of disregarded as woo-woo, or she's just
Mm,
being paranoid, or she's just being a helicopter parent. And there's actual biologic evidence of when you become pregnant, of
mm,
increased awareness, increased ability when your child is born to detect temperature changes. Your hormones play into it. The ability to sense any changes in their schedule, their behavior. And you talk to any mom, most of the time, they know what type of day it's going to be just when they see their child wake up. By
yeah,
like sometimes I can tell when my 3-year-old comes down the stairs what type of morning it's going to be. And that's something that I'm
yeah.
gifted as a mother, that I spend so much time with them. And that's the other part. We have the most anecdotal experience and evidence of our specific child. No
Mm,
matter what medical provider you go to, how long they've been practicing, how many certifications they have behind their name,
yeah.
you have the most expert experience with your specific child. And yes, you can go and seek that healthcare provider's advice, and they can provide diagnostic exams or physical exams, and that is great. That is a wonderful tool. But ultimately, you are the expert in your child.
Mm,
And I think that's something that is missing in our culture. It's
yeah,
something that I consistently see in my DMs of people asking me, a complete stranger on the internet, what to do. And
yeah.
I say back to them, I can't make that decision for you. I don't know your situation. I don't know your child. I can't do that. That has to be you.
Mm,
Because ultimately you're the one that's going to live with whatever consequences it might be, whether you need to research that disease if you decide to opt out of that product, but also understand that there are still many of those products that have limitations of effectiveness, and you still need to be alert to those diseases, and your child may still be exposed to those diseases. So you still need to be aware of that as well.
mm,
And that it just goes back to like everything that you were talking about, is that bodily intelligence and being in tune with it, and not dampening it or numbing it, and just allowing us to be observant and respectful of the bodily signals that they're
mm,
communicating to us. I believe, every single symptom is your body trying to communicate to you. And so, learning how your body works, learning about the circulatory system, learning about the lymphatic system, learning about all these different things, once you start learning about them, and you can go onto YouTube. I mean, there's plenty of free resources out there. Me and my kids will
mm,
sit down sometimes if they have a sniffle and they're wondering, Mom, why do I have so much mucus? And we'll sit down, I'll go, well, let's talk about it. What is your body doing? Oh, it's pushing out things that are
mm,
foreign and, toxins, and it's trying to detox. And so it's a great opportunity that I talk with my kids,
mm.
just learning about those different things. And it just pulls you out of that fear, consumption and worry, and it just empowers you, and it
Yeah.
allows you to decide, okay, is if my child does get this disease, is this the worst thing that could happen? What are some other things that I could do? Whether I accept, delay, or decline vaccines, my child might be exposed to it and may get it. That's
Mm,
just a scientific
yeah.
fact. So let's learn about the disease. Let's learn how it transmits. Let's learn the early warning symptoms so that if it does
And
present, then I can.
how to treat it.
Exactly,
Like
exactly. That
we
is a
can treat a
lost
lot of these
art.
things. Yeah, that's right.
Exactly. There
Yeah.
are so many things that we have within our control and with our power that we don't really know. And I think, again, that goes back to not having that ability to cultivate that intuition. And that's something that hopefully by having these conversations
Yeah.
and little by little, we can shift that culture. I think
You
it's
made
very
an
important.
you made an interesting point even before we started recording around this intuition piece is we're being conditioned from the moment that we suspect we're pregnant to look for validation of our pregnancy by going to the doctor, um, or trusting that, it'll be when they say we're pregnant that we're pregnant, and we're going through a pregnancy and we're going to our antenatal visits and we're being told this and we're being told that. And actually, it's reminding me of my beautiful midwife. She was a great one for believing that women know. She used to ask me more questions than I'd ask her. And she'd get me to tune in. And when I'd ask her a question, she'd say, "What do you think of that? What's your sense of that situation?"
That's a
And
great midwife.
yeah, she believed in, once again, in that innate intelligence of the body. And she believed for her to be a good midwife, she had to listen to the mother. So she was the very first person that redirected me back to me when it came to leaning into my own sense and inner wisdom to know what I need when I need it. And I mean, that's how I teach, and I truly believe that's very true. But unfortunately, our minds get busy, and I imagine too, Alexandra, you can respond to this. Sometimes reading too much can get in the way. It can create even more noise for us really being able to tune in. What do you think is the balance there? How do people achieve that balance?
I call it analysis paralysis because
Yeah,
that's how
yeah,
it feels for me when I start
yeah,
to research too much. And I have a very addictive behavior, so when I start researching something, I go all in.
yeah, right.
And my husband won't see me for hours, sometimes days
You've
because I
gone
just put
down the
those
rabbit
blinders
hole.
on. Exactly. And that can sometimes be very unproductive because you
Yeah.
start going down all these different rabbit holes and it's just can be very overwhelming. So that's why earlier when I said taking those breaks, it's
Mm,
actually very from a lesson that I've learned through past pain is that when
yeah.
you go too far too deep, you do get into that mindset of there's so much information. I
Mm,
don't know how to process this.
yeah.
My amygdala is overworking. My emotions are all over the place and I can't
Mm,
even process the information. And there's actually, again, I love like the biological events of things, how when you over consume information, it
mm,
actually shuts down your long-term memory processing. It
yeah.
shuts down your ability to understand the information that you're consuming. And so it sounds so simple, but just taking those little breaks and realizing that informed consent is not an exploding offer. It's typically, and you touched on this earlier, most of the time you have time. Most of the
Mm,
time you are able to go seek that information, schedule a follow-up appointment with your
yeah.
provider. Say, you know what, I want to talk to my spouse or my partner about this. I want to go read some inserts. I want to read a little bit more about this product to make a more informed decision. And that's
Mm,
okay. You have the right as a parent to do that. And take that time to look through everything,
mm,
take the free training course, go through, find the inserts, decide. Sometimes it might not be that specific product, but maybe it's a competitor's product with a different dosage level of ingredients, or maybe it doesn't have that adjuvant in it, or maybe it doesn't have that preservative in it, that
mm,
you can find a different alternative. There's so many options available on the market that we're not really exposed to. We're kind of just taught if you go to this provider, these are the only products that you're going to be allowed to accept. Well, maybe you can go to a different provider and you can have
mm,
different options available to you. So that would be my response is just take as much time as you need. I actually was just talking with a college student and she was saying, when should I start researching for pregnancy or finding a pediatrician? And I told her now. Now is the time to do it because it might sound silly, but once you become pregnant, it almost feels like you have this ticking time
mm,
bomb because you have a deadline of when the baby's gonna come, and then you get the emotions, and then the regular pregnancy, ailments that tend to happen, and it can be really hard. I had horrible heartburn, and sometimes you just don't want to research when you are constantly dealing with heartburn. So, researching all that now and taking the time earlier on before you have the additional emotional aspect to it is very valuable.
Mm. Our subconscious mind is wired to pick up on fears. And so sometimes the more we learn, the more fear it can create. And I would encourage pregnant women listening to this to really tune in to what it is that they can take in and to be very, very specific about what they sense they need to know. Because I think you're
Mhm.
right. If you go too far down the rabbit hole, your mind doesn't know how to process this. And there's not that sense of um, balance around what it is that you're doing. It can be very, very overwhelming. And overloading the mind becomes noise to the deeper wisdom within you. And so learning to sort of balance those two out. And different women have different needs around that. Some women want to know just about everything, and other women are just like, no, no, I'm only taking in what I need. And
Right.
they might rely more on their intuitive guidance rather than the knowledge and the wisdom. But I think the most important thing when it comes to informed consent that we can all agree on, actually, just as a side note, I don't personally like the term informed consent because it makes it sound like we inform you and you consent. Okay,
Hmm.
consent means
Hmm.
you can say yes or no.
Hmm.
Um, but it is a legal right. It is something you want to exercise according to what you sense and feel and know to be true to what's right for you and to your family. And my darling hearts, I would always encourage you to practice saying the word no, thank you. I often get my classes to repeat after me. No, thank you. I am choosing to decline at this time, but I might reconsider later. Don't ever do a hard no because you just don't know what's around the corner and you might have to pivot, you might have to change your mind. But always remember to exercise your capacity to say, no, thank you. I'm choosing to decline at this time. I might revisit this later. Thank you for providing that information for me. It's important we learn to work with our health professionals, not against them. We're all on the same page, we're all on the same team. But we have to appreciate where their limitations are of knowledge and understanding. There is so much information. We can't expect them to give us full informed consent. Even doctors who, by law have to provide that, we still can't expect them to know everything. We can't expect them to be perfect. They're humans just like you and I. And they make the best call according to where they're sitting. And if they're smart enough, they'll tune into you as well. However, we have to step up to the plate. We have to get in that decision making circle and become a part of the decision making process because not doing that is a decision as well. And
Hmm.
maybe that's okay for some people. I don't judge anybody. We all have to come to this level of maturity and level of responsibility and ownership in our own time and in our own way. Okay, it's a journey, and I certainly didn't start out being the advocate that I am now for myself and my family. That took practice. It took standoffs with a doctor. I remember a time when I actually got so cranky at a doctor because he wasn't listening to me, where I just looked at the nurse next to me and I said, "You need to take this person out of my space. I want somebody who I can talk to, please." But I had two kids by then, and I was very clear about what was right for my son in that moment, and he was taking me down a path I didn't want to go to. That was probably the first moment of conviction where I just went, hang on, don't you dare discount what I'm saying here just because you think you
Hmm.
know more. Uh-uh, this is my son and I'm going to make the call. But that didn't happen straight out of the gate, I can tell you now.
Well, I just want to say real quick, I just interviewed someone. She is a very, very young mother, and
Mm,
she was saying that her ability to exercise informed consent and have that firm but kind no thank you was
yeah.
actually a seed planted by her own mother when she was a preteen and her doctor was trying to put her on birth control for acne. And she remembers her mom doing that very thing that you just described.
Wow.
And that inspired her and resonated with her years later when
Yeah.
she became a mother. So, how wonderful that you set that precedent for your children so they
Mm,
could see what that looks like and they
yeah.
could understand that they do have the right, they have the ability, and that you did it with compassion too. That
Mhm.
is just an absolute beautiful thing that they could learn that so early on. And that's something when I talk with some moms and they have that fear and they have that anxiety and say, this is something that's very important to not only do for yourself, but also for your children. And
Yeah.
so you don't want them to blindly accept products, whatever those products might be, medical or anything
Mm,
else. And so that, again, I just always come back to you're just being an informed consumer.
mm,
You're just learning everything that you need to know about this product so you can make a well-considered decision. And
yeah.
I love that you also brought up that it is a wonderful endeavor to try to have that collaborative environment with the provider and understand that we all want what is best for ourselves, our families, and our communities. But even still, you definitely, if you feel like there's medical coercion or medical bullying, that you can step into that authority.
Mm, mm. Absolutely. I always say there's no place for ego when it comes to labor and birth and parenting and all things really, in that when doctors get their heckles up or they end up coming from ego, that's not very smart. That's defensive medicine.
Mhm.
And it's showing you that they're not actually that confident in what they're doing. They need to respect the rights of the people they're working with, even if they go against their medical opinion. It's okay to do that. In fact, it can be smart under some circumstances. But at the end of the day, they also know things that we don't know. But your message today, Alexandra, has been a very powerful one because it really is getting us to step up and read the inserts, read the information so we can get a much better sense of what could be the risks and benefits and if there's any side effects to be able to recognize that, to appreciate and be conscious about when we do agree to things that we're doing it with a level of knowledge and understanding around the choices we have in that space. So I hope this has been a good conversation for all of you to listen to. I think it's a very important topic for us, not just for birth, but for life, parenting. It's only going to get bigger, my darlings, when those beautiful babies land. You continue to be their advocate until they take the reins. Do you want to finish with any message for my listeners, Alexandra?
Well, I just am so grateful for you having this conversation to be able to pour into everyone listening. I am deeply invested in shifting our culture. I believe that our culture is lacking, and it's the conversations like this that help
Mm,
influence our circles of influence, so the people that are around us, and to be able to have those open and honest conversations. So I thank everyone that's listening. I hope that um, there were opened eyes and minds and hearts, and that find me at justtheinserts.com. All of my information is there. Most of it is through just me finding this research for myself and just putting it out for other people that might find it and have it
beautiful.
resonate with them.
Thank you. And we'll put those links in the show notes for you as well. Thanks everybody for listening, and we'll see you again or you'll hear from us again in our next podcast. Have a great week. Bye.